Hello, this is the Drone Liquefier tutorial video. This is for the 1.1 version. I have updated it since I released this a few days ago with the addition of the liquefier dial. So as you bring this from 0 all the way through to 100, we cycle through the different modes and we get the full drone at 100. So if you're using this out of the box, chuck this on 100 and you'll get your drone soundscape straight away. Let's go back to the dry value here and let's talk about how this works. Up the top we have the waveform area. This is an internal buffer, an internal storage area. So as you feed audio to this plugin, it will constantly write into this buffer. You can see it scrolling along here, and this is 10 seconds long by default. Now what happens when it's in the buffer is the grain manipulation starts coming into effect. The grain manipulation works by choosing a specific area of the buffer and then taking little snippets of audio out of that area and playing them. They're called grains. So let me turn the dry down and bring the grain up here. And you see that this area here, which is in blue, is currently where it is selecting the grains from. Now we have two controls here which we can change the grain selection area. So first we have the position. This will move it across the waveform from left to right to left to right. And we have the width. So if I bring this down really thin, you'll hear that it's just continuously playing what is inside this blue area, which is a very small band. If I bring the position all the way back down here, you'll see as I move this down, we can cycle through the different areas of the waveform. I can make this incredibly small, just so it's a tiny little slither. And it kind of sounds like the original, but the grains are going quite slowly. So let's make this a bit faster. I'm going to change the duration here and bring this down so it's quite short. And you can hear now the grains are playing at 66.9 milliseconds each for the duration, so they're repeating themselves incredibly fast. So let's bring this back. And you can hear as I cycle from left to right now, we're actually starting to get something that sounds like the original. We can kind of slow the audio down if we were to cycle through this. In fact, let's use the LFO. So each one of these four dials here, I'll get to the pitch in a minute, each one of these has an LFO area to the right. So the LFO is a low frequency oscillator, and this will modulate the particular parameter, position, width, pitch or duration on its own. So I'm going to turn this on for the position down here, and let's bring the amount up. We'll bring it all the way up to 1. So now you'll see this is moving all by itself. So the position is scrolling from left to right, slowing down and coming back to the left. That's because we are on a sine wave, a nice smooth curve. But if I was to just select up, you'll see that this goes all the way to the end. Let's bring the rate up to make it a bit faster. It gets all the way to the end and then it snaps back to the left hand side. So this will scroll through, and you can kind of hear the audio sounds similar to the original now because it's going in the same direction as the waveform is being recorded. We can change this to down if we want to go reverse. If we want to go back, we can go triangle, which is just a sine wave with a sharp edge, or we can go square if we want to very quickly snap between two areas. So if I was if I was to bring the amount down here and bring the offset up and make it fast, we will see we're now quickly snapping between two particular points. Let's leave it on the up and let's bring the rate down nice and slow. Let's also add the LFO to the width. So I'm going to turn this on, bring the amount up a little bit, and you'll see that the width is now modulating as well. I'm going to put these both on sine waves just so we've got a nice kind of smooth shape. Very good. Now let's talk about the pitch. What the pitch does is simply change the grain's pitch in an amount by semitones. So by default, if I was to just click on this and push the down key, let's go down a semitone. Let's keep going. And now we're down an octave. But of course, we have a random parameter with the grain manipulation. So if I was to bring this up, each individual grain is going to get a randomized pitch shift. Let me just restart the audio so we've got something to work with. And the more we bring this up, the more chaotic it gets. So if you like super noisy, chaotic stuff, use the random here. Let's bring the pitch back to 0 by double clicking. Very good. Let's bring the duration out so we can hear the individual grains moving. Now you'll notice that it's quite crazy. Let's bring the random down. You'll notice that the duration also has a random. So if I bring this up, the duration is now getting randomized between very short and very fast. And the last thing we have is the grain attack. So this will add a slight attack to the amplitude of each grain. If you're working with something which has beats or has sharp edges or transients, you might find you're getting some clicks. So by bringing this up, it'll just add a gentle envelope to each grain, and that will probably get rid of the clicks. Very good. Let's bring the random down here. I'm going to turn the LFO off. Let's turn it off here as well. Let's bring the width back up. You'll notice that the pitch also has an LFO, so if I was to turn this on and choose up and bring the amount up. Let's bring the offset. I haven't talked about the offset. The offset will simply shift the position of which the LFO is centered around. So if you find that the LFO is modulating the pitch down too low, like it was when it was on 0, bring it up to 0.5 and it will start oscillating around the center frequency. Let's bring the rate up here, so you can see the inside of this dial is moving at the shape to the LFO. Let's go down. Now this sounds pretty crazy and it doesn't sound that good, but as I said, if you bring the reverb up, that's where you start getting the drone stuff. Anyway, let's turn off the LFO and let's bring the pitch back to 0 and let's randomize. Oh no, I think we're done with the grain manipulation area. So anyway, those 4 tools are the ways that you get the chaos. And the reason this is here, instead of just throwing a reverb on it, is it really fragments up the audio before it gets sent to the reverb. So the reverb will apply a big lush tail to everything, but it retains I find it retains the timbre or the vibe of the original audio, but it mangles it up so much that you can't actually hear specific pieces of the audio. So it's really, really cool to feed this something. I'm not going to do it on this video because it'll get copy strike, but if you feed it a song that you like, just anything that you find, just a finished track, it'll sound like the finished track, but the drone version. And that's what I wanted to achieve for this. Okay, one more thing here. We have the pan area. I'm going to bring the duration down here quite short and bring the position up here. And let's bring the pan to the left. You can hear now all the grains are on the left, and we'll bring it to the right. They're all on the right. We can use random. This will randomize each individual grain. So you get a stereo effect, especially if things are going really fast. Let's make it quite slow. Excellent, let's move across to the reverb. Now the reverb has 4 parameters. I'm just going to turn the grain down and the reverb up here in the mixer area, just so we can hear the reverb. So that's the grains now applied through the reverb. They're being processed by the reverb. So the reverb has 4 parameters: the size, the damp, the decay, and the diff. So the size it reduces the length of the delays in the algorithm. So the reverb is bouncing heaps of times and playing the audio over and over and over. This determines how long those particular delays are. So if you bring this right down, it kind of sounds more metallic and artificial, or like you're in a smaller room. Now the decay is how long it takes for the overall reverb to die. So if I was to bring this down quite short as well, I'm going to get these grains just doing something a little bit sporadic here. Here we go. Now I'm going to bring the reverb back up again. Bring the grain down. Bring the master up a bit. So you can hear with the shorter size, shorter decay, we're just getting a kind of a slight reverb. It almost sounds like the original, but it's in a small room or something. But if we bring these up, that's where you get the lushness, and these are really, really long, super long. The damp it makes the high frequencies die faster, so it's a more natural kind of organic way that something will reverberate. So as I bring this down, you'll hear that the lows and the mids, or whatever, wherever this particular kilohertz point is, the frequencies above this will die faster, and it just creates more of a natural kind of feeling. So if you're feeling like you want a big cathedral or something, bring the dampening down a bit. I'm going to bring it back up, and the diff is how complex the reverb sounds. So this is how many surfaces the sound will bounce off in the virtual environment. This kind of creates a virtual environment. So if you bring this down, the reverb is a lot less complex. Anyway, I like having these all up for the drone thing. Very good. Now let's talk about the mixer area. This is pretty self-explanatory. So we had the liquefy, so this will go from dry just to the grains at 50 all the way to fully reverberated at 100, and we can change these and pick and mix as we choose here. Let's bring the pitch down in the grain manipulation to -12. Let's bring the grains down, and let's bring the dry up. So we have the original and just the reverb, but the reverb is, or the grain and the reverb is being processed -12 semitones. So you can get kind of an eerie, kind of characteristic uniqueness to your sound of a real spooky stuff going on. If you want to feed something in here, leave the dry up and the reverb up. Super cool. Okay, let's talk about the settings page. This is where you can control various other things. The record time, this is how big the internal buffer is. So I find 10 seconds is good for drone stuff, but if you want a shorter buffer period, if you want this to record a shorter time, you can change this. This is a millisecond, so 10,000 is 10 seconds. If you want it to be 1 second, it would be 1,000. Let's bring the grains back up and the reverb down. Let's talk about the total grains. I'm going to make this quite short. So the total grains is how many grains are going to be played at once. So if I bring the duration up here, things are going to get quite noisy. If I bring this up to its maximum value, you do get a little bit of a skip in the audio here because there's quite a lot of processing happening in the DSP. Now we have 96 grains going at once. This is where you get a really busy sound. Let's bring the grains down to just, what did I set the minimum on? 4? There we go. So it's a lot less complex. So if you just want more and more chaos, bring this up to an incredibly high value. This will use quite significantly more CPU as well, so I suggest you keep this on 16. Now the grain density, this is an interesting one. This is how often a new grain will trigger. So let's bring the pitch back up here. I'm going to bring the width right out. Let's bring the grain density down really short and bring the duration down incredibly short. Let's bring the grain density up. So you'll see how it's kind of expanding them out quite long. And even though this doesn't sound amazing right now, this very, very short stabby grains, if I was to bring this down and bring the reverb up, we still get an epic kind of drone sound. Let's bring the grains back up here. Now, the last thing we can do with the grain density is we can randomize this each time a new grain is triggered. So you can do this by setting a minimum and a maximum value. So you'll see we have the min set on 10 milliseconds, the max set on 500. If I turn the random on, you'll see we're now getting random grain density here. Let's bring the duration out a little bit longer. You can think of the duration as the decay. Bring the random on the pitch up a bit. So you see each time we're getting a new grain, it's picking a new millisecond amount for the density. So if I was to bring this to 50 milliseconds, it's going to go much faster. And again, here's the reverb of that. Let's bring the pitch right down. Now we're getting into space drone territory. Cool stuff. Finally, we have, we talked about the random, we have the audio in, so if you do not want to keep recording into the buffer, turn this off. It will complete its cycle of however long the buffer is, but then when it gets back to the start, it will retain what's currently already in the buffer. So if you've recorded something that you want to keep, turn the audio in off. Now do note that the internal buffer is lost when you close Ableton Live, you load a new project, you delete the device or whatever. So the buffer does not stay with your project. If you get something you like and then save it, it will not be there next time. So just keep that in note. And the final thing is reset, just clears the buffer and clears everything. So that is the Drone Liquefier 1.1. I'm always interested to hear people's feedback on what they think could be better or what they'd like added, so please do leave a comment below if you have some input. Also, thank you very much to my Patreons, my Twitch subscribers, and my YouTube members. You guys are the reason that this is free to the public. Thank you so, so much. Goodbye.